The annual defense bill now on its way to the Senate, where many of the amendments passed by Republicans in the House will likely render their version dead on arrival. Joining us here in Washington, Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton. Welcome back.
Thank you, Shannon. It's good to be back.
You've already had an appearance on the show. We'll get back to that in just a minute. But I want to talk about this, what passed through the House and now heads to the Senate. Democrats say this will never see the light of day. It'll never get to the president's desk. Here's a little bit of their reaction.
I am bitterly disappointed that a bipartisan defense authorization bill is being caught up by political grandstanding amendments.
They are so obsessed with jamming their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people that extreme MAGA Republicans are willing to even detonate the ability of our military to do what it needs to do to keep us safe.
One of your fellow vets over in Congress, Seth Moulton, says essentially Republicans are using troops as political pawns. How do you respond?
Well, first off, it's rich to hear these Democrats complaining about a partisan defense bill, because this happened when Nancy Pelosi was the speaker as well. We worked it out. We worked it out every year for over 60 years to pass the defense bill. But it's Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin, the Democrats, who are politicizing the military. What the House has done is taken reasonable steps, supported by a large majority of Americans, to ensure that we're funding our troops and the weapons they need to keep our country safe, not paying for abortion tourism or sex change operation or diversity commissars, things that should not be happening in our military.
You know how this is going to land, though, in the Senate. So what happens? You all pass your version. It goes to conference. Do any of these amendments survive? Do they go away?
We'll see. The Senate may take up the defense bill this year or this week and next week. And if so, then we'll move on to what you said is a conference where the two chambers reconcile the differences. You never quite know how those are going to work out. I hope all these measures stay in there because, again, the military should not be paying for abortion tourism or diversity consultants or sex change operations. They should be buying the weapons that we need to defend our nation and to support our troops. So
let's talk about that, because Democrats and the left will say women who are serving in uniform, if they're stationed in an area where they cannot get an abortion, that the Pentagon should facilitate a way for them to get that abortion. Senator Tommy Tuberville is taking a lot of heat over this because he said, listen, I told the Pentagon I was going to do this if they made this move. He is now blocking hundreds of military promotions. Here's what the Secretary of Defense says about that.
This is a national security issue. It's a readiness issue, and we shouldn't kid ourselves. And I think any member of the Senate Armed Services Committee knows that.
And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, when he was asked about this, said, quote, I don't support putting a hold on military nominations. Do you?
Well, Shannon, if the Secretary of Defense and the President think that this is a readiness issue and they want to find the responsible party, they should look in the mirror. They're the ones who are violating the law and using taxpayer funds to pay for abortion tourism. Just let me give you an example of how extreme this policy is. A young airman at Little Rock Air Force Base could walk in and demand 3 weeks of uncharged paid leave and get travel and meals and lodging paid for to go get an elective abortion. Another airman could walk in and say, my mother or my father just unexpectedly died. Can I have leave to go to their funeral? That would be charged leave that comes out of their annual allotment, and they would get no expenses paid. I think most Americans agree that that is an insane policy. Again, the military should not be paying for abortion tourism.
So what should women who are in uniform in a place where they cannot access abortion because they are there on orders, what should they do?
Well, if they want to take that step, they have 30 days of annual leave. It shouldn't be taxpayer funds giving them 3 weeks of paid, uncharged leave, and then also paying for travel and lodging and meals, something that we don't even give our troops when they have a parent die or a sibling die or a beloved grandparent die.
How does this end?
Well, it should end with Lloyd Austin and Joe Biden agreeing to follow the law and rescinding their policy.
They don't sound like they're inching towards that at all. I mean, does Senator Tuberville have enough pressure on him that he rethinks where he's at?
Well, again, if Lloyd Austin and Joe Biden think that this is a threat to our national security, the simplest thing to do would be to revert to the same practices we had for decades, the same practices we had last year after the Supreme Court reversed Roe v. Wade, and rescind this unlawful policy on abortion tourism.
Okay, let's talk about cocaine at the White House. You heard what John Kirby had to say. They take this very seriously. He's not happy that they haven't found answers either. But they said, you know, the Secret Service says We sent this stuff to the FBI lab. We got no latent fingerprints. We did not get enough DNA. They said insufficient DNA. They also say there was no surveillance camera in the area that would have caught this. They end with this. Without physical evidence, the investigation will not be able to single out a person of interest from the hundreds of individuals who passed through the vestibule where the cocaine was discovered. The Secret Service investigation is closed due to a lack of physical evidence. I know that you reached out directly to the Secret Service. You demanded answers by Friday afternoon. What have you gotten?
We've got no answers. That's not surprising. The Secret Service is a troubled agency that's long had challenges. It probably needs new leadership. I take this very seriously. I mean, what if this was anthrax? This is supposed to be the most secure building in the world. Yet the Secret Service closed down this investigation after just a few days. It's my understanding they barely conducted any interviews. I don't think they interviewed the president's son, who's a known cocaine addict. This is like if Hamburglar lived in the White House and all the hamburgers disappeared, and they said they didn't have any suspects or no one they could question. They know who went through those doors, so they can interview them as well. If the president were really serious about it, he could demand everybody that goes through those doors submit to a drug test. You can use hair testing samples and identify anyone who's used cocaine in the last few months. Those are the steps you would take if you took this seriously. This just seems like another Biden cover-up.
Well, and to be clear, the White House has said that Hunter Biden was not there at the time that this was discovered. The days around that apparently were searched as well. So we'll wait to see. Is there any other body? I mean, there are members of Congress who've said they may have some oversight to launch some kind of investigation. Would that go anywhere?
Well, this is a part of the oversight that we conduct in the Judiciary Committee, also on the Homeland Security Committee. I suspect the Republican majority in the House will take this seriously. I don't think the Senate Democrats will. And add this to one of the growing numbers of investigation into cover-ups related to Joe Biden and his family.
Okay, let us know if you get anything from Secret Service on your request. Okay, also, FBI Director Christopher Wray testified this week on the Hill, and he was pressed on a number of things and admitted that a number of businesses do regularly turn over information on U.S. customers without warrants, quote, all the time. Here's part of his interaction with Representative Thomas Massey.
George Hill, former FBI supervisory intelligence analyst in the Boston field office, told us that the Bank of America, with no legal process, gave to the FBI gun purchase records with no geographical boundaries for anybody that was a Bank of America customer. Is that true?
A number of business community partners all the time, including financial institutions, share information with us about possible criminal activity, and my understanding is that that's fully lawful.
All right, we're both lawyers. Do you think it's fully lawful? And more importantly, should it be?
Well, I think the second question is a key point. Whether it is or is not, I don't think most Americans expect their banks to be handing over records of their purchases without any kind of probable cause or even reasonable suspicion. I think the conversation that happened there on that tape and in the hearing too contrasts what we were just talking about, the Secret Service investigation at the White House. The government will dedicate thousands and thousands of agents to try to find every grandmother with a red MAGA hat on who was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, yet they'll shut down the investigation of cocaine at the White House in just a few days. Look, the FBI had problems under Jim Comey. That's why he was rightly fired. Christopher Wray was hired to help clean it up, especially to reform its culture at the top. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. You still see FBI agents threatening that traditional Catholics could be domestic extremists or conducting raids at the home of pro-life activists for the grave crime of singing hymns in front of abortion clinics. There is a lot of reform that needs to happen at the FBI.
To be fair, the director did say that that memo on Catholic churches was pulled. I know that the House is pushing to talk to the people who were behind it because they want to know how it ever got there. I don't know if we'll ever get testimony from them.
I think what worries most Americans, at least most Republicans and conservatives, is it seems like every incident of misconduct or abuse or mistake for which the FBI has to apologize is always targeting people on the center right. It's never targeting people on the center left.
Let's talk about another hot button issue. You've introduced a bill that would give parents more rights, more information if, say, their child at school is considering going through gender transitioning, what the school has to disclose to parents, those kinds of things. But a GOP-appointed federal judge just days ago ruled against a parent in California who had this situation with an elementary-age child. The school did not tell them what was going on. The judge said this: the issue before this court is not whether it is a good idea for school districts to notify parents of a minor's gender identity and receive consent before using alternative names and pronouns, but whether the U.S. Constitution mandates such parental authority. This court holds that it does not. I don't imagine you're going to get a lot of Democrat support on your bill, but if you do, will it survive legal scrutiny? This judge says if it's based on the U.S. Constitution, no.
Well, so I think that's in conflict with a state law in which parents are trying to say that they have an inherent right under the Constitution to control the upbringing of their child. And the Supreme Court has recognized such a right in some cases. But my law would simply say that state law cannot keep from parents the fact that their kid may be trying to transition or maybe have teachers and counselors influencing them. I mean, schools can't even give kids a Tylenol without getting permission from their parents. They shouldn't be able to change their gender without notifying their parents. I think that's basic common sense that every parent would agree with.
You think you could get some Democrat votes?
I would hope so. I would hope that most Democrats, that most sane Americans would think that parents should have a say over what sex their kid is. But you know, in these days, the Democrats are kind of very focused on the extremist elements of their base, so I'm not sure.
Well, we'll follow the legislation. Senator, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.